It's my turn now.
When Man About the House first aired in 1973, it didn't just make people laugh, it rattled the safe little cages of British television. A man moving into a flat with two single women? For a nation still clinging to tradition, this was daring, cheeky, even scandalous. But that was precisely why audiences couldn't look away. Here was a sitcom that wasn't afraid to wink at changing times, to poke fun at outdated morals, and to celebrate a younger generation finding its own way in a world no longer bound by the rules of the past. It was sexy without being crass, modern without losing its heart, and above all, it was brilliantly funny. At its center was an unforgettable cast. Richard O'Sullivan, Paula Wilcox, and Sally Tomsett played the vibrant trio who embodied the youth of the 70s. Yet it was the orbiting characters, those landlords, parents, and friends, who truly gave the series its unforgettable texture. Yootha Joyce, with her razor wit, and Brian Murphy, with his bumbling innocence, became comedy gold as the Ropers, so beloved that they spun off into their own series. Doug Fisher added chaos as the cheeky neighbor Larry, while Roy Kinnear, already a familiar face in cinema, dropped in with his comic brilliance. Norman Eshley charmed as Chrissy's suitor, while Daphne Oxenford and Leslie Sands grounded the sitcom as Chrissy's well-meaning but bewildered parents, representing the generational gulf at the heart of the show. Together, they created something larger than life, a world that felt at once outrageous and achingly real. But time, as it always does, has rewritten the laughter with shadows. Many of those faces that once brought joy into living rooms across Britain are no longer with us. Their stories, tucked behind the glow of the television screen, reveal lives marked by triumph and tragedy, fame and fragility. Yootha Joyce, the dazzling star who seemed untouchable, gone far too soon at the peak of her powers. Brian Murphy, the lovable fool whose passing in 2025 felt like the final curtain call for an entire era. Doug Fisher, whose sly humor never found the recognition it deserved, slipping quietly from the stage of life. Roy Kinnear, whose warmth and humor made him beloved around the world, taken in an instant by a tragic accident that stunned the film industry. Norman Eshley, the handsome charmer whose career was derailed by fate, remembered as much for what might have been as for what he achieved. Daphne Oxenford, the gentle motherly figure whose voice shaped generations, leaving behind a legacy of comfort and grace. And Leslie Sands, the stern but steady father figure, an actor who embodied authority, his presence forever woven into the fabric of British television. The irony of Man About the House is that while it was built on laughter, the stories of those who brought it to life remind us how fragile that laughter can be. Behind every sharp line and comic misunderstanding were real people navigating lives filled with struggle, heartbreak, and fleeting triumph. Today, the show lives on in reruns, still making audiences smile, but the knowledge of what happened to its cast adds a bittersweet undertone. We don't just laugh with them anymore, we remember them. This video will peel back the curtain and take you inside those lives. We will revisit the brilliance they brought to the screen, the secrets and struggles that defined their off-screen journeys, and the legacies they left behind. It is a story of joy and sorrow, of laughter and loss, of television magic and the mortality that shadows it. So, what truly became of the stars of Man About the House once the cameras stopped rolling? And how do their stories, decades later, still haunt and fascinate us? Stay with us as we uncover the untold truths behind the laughter, honoring the 7 unforgettable actors who gave everything to a sitcom that dared to change the rules. Yootha Joyce, the sharp-tongued landlady who hid a fragile soul. Yootha Joyce was born in 1927 in Wandsworth, London, and from an early age she displayed a natural flair for performance. She trained at the prestigious Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, and spent years refining her craft on stage before turning to television. By the time she joined Man About the House in 1973, she was in her mid-40s and already known as a seasoned performer. Cast as Mildred Roper, the sharp-tongued and ever-frustrated wife of George, Joyce turned what might have been a simple caricature into one of the most beloved characters in British comedy. Her biting one-liners, delivered with impeccable timing, made her unforgettable, and her chemistry with Brian Murphy as George was electric. Their constant bickering became one of the defining elements of the show, so much so that they were given their own spin-off, George and Mildred, which only cemented their status as icons. Behind her comedic brilliance, however, Joyce's life was not as light-hearted. She had once been married to actor Glyn Edwards, but the marriage ended in divorce, leaving her with a sense of personal turbulence even as her career thrived. Off-screen, she was remembered as warm and generous, a friend who could light up a room with her humor. Yet whispers of her private struggles circulated, with colleagues later suggesting that her lifestyle and health were constant concerns. These shadows stood in stark contrast to the sharp, vivacious woman audiences adored on screen. Tragically, Yootha Joyce died in 1980 at the age of 53, just as her career was at its peak. Her death shocked the entertainment world, not only because it was so sudden, but also because it robbed British comedy of one of its brightest talents. George and Mildred was forced to end abruptly, leaving viewers with a sense of loss that went far beyond the fictional world of sitcoms. Her story remains one of both triumph and tragedy, a gifted actress who could make millions laugh but could not escape her own vulnerabilities. Today, when audiences revisit Man About the House or George and Mildred, they see more than just a funny character. They see Yootha Joyce, a woman whose brilliance lit up the screen but whose life ended far too soon. Brian Murphy, the lovable fool who outlived his comedy but not his legacy. Brian Murphy was born in 1932 on the Isle of Wight, and from the start he showed an instinct for humor. By the time he took on the role of George Roper in Man About the House, he had already built a solid career in repertory theater and television. As George, the bumbling and perpetually clueless husband of Yootha Joyce's sharp-tongued Mildred, Murphy became half of one of the most iconic comedy duos in British history. Their constant sparring, Mildred's frustrated barbs against George's dim-witted innocence, gave the sitcom much of its enduring charm. The audience laughed at George's foolishness, but they also felt a surprising affection for him, a quality that Murphy delivered with warmth and subtlety. The success of George and Mildred was so overwhelming that the pair were granted their own spin-off series, aptly titled George and Mildred. Running from 1976 until 1979, the show gave Murphy his most lasting legacy, one that etched his name firmly into the story of British sitcoms. Even after Joyce's sudden death in 1980 brought the spin-off to an abrupt end, Murphy carried on with resilience, taking roles in other sitcoms and dramas such as Last of the Summer Wine and One Foot in the Grave. Still, he could never quite escape the shadow of George Roper, a character so ingrained in the public imagination that it became both his greatest blessing and his unavoidable typecasting. Off-screen, Murphy was regarded as a quiet, grounded man who treated his colleagues with kindness. He never chased the tabloids or scandal, and perhaps for that reason he retained the respect of the industry long after his days of peak fame. He continued to work steadily into the later years of his career, a familiar face on television even if never again a household name in the way he had once been. Brian Murphy passed away in February 2025 at the age of 92, closing the chapter on a life that had stretched across more than half a century of performance. His passing was mourned as the final farewell to the Ropers, the duo who had defined a generation of comedy. Though George Roper was a fool on screen, Murphy himself was far from it. He crafted a character that audiences still remember with love, ensuring that his legacy will live on as one of the great treasures of British sitcom history. Doug Fisher, the cheeky friend who never found the spotlight he deserved. Doug Fisher was born in 1941 in St. Albans, Hertfordshire, and though his career stretched across stage and television, he is best remembered for his role as Larry Simmons in Man About the House. Larry was the cheeky, womanizing neighbor who frequently popped into the flat, bringing with him a whirlwind of flirtations and self-absorbed antics. Fisher played him with just the right balance of swagger and comic timing, making Larry both irritating and endearing. He wasn't the heart of the sitcom, but he added an unpredictable spark that made the flatmates' lives, and the show itself, more chaotic and entertaining. For Fisher, Man About the House was both a breakthrough and a limitation. On one hand, it gave him national recognition, introducing him to millions of viewers who tuned in weekly. On the other, the role of Larry defined him so strongly that it was difficult to step out of that shadow. After the sitcom, Fisher continued to work in television, appearing in various dramas and comedies, but he never secured another part that resonated as strongly with the public. The curse of typecasting, which haunted so many sitcom actors of the era, weighed heavily on him as well. Off-screen, Fisher kept his personal life relatively private. He was remembered by colleagues as a professional who could always deliver a performance, but unlike many of his peers, he was not one to seek out the spotlight or become entangled in scandals. Perhaps that was why his death in 2000 at the age of 59 passed with little media attention, a quiet departure for an actor who had once been a familiar face in millions of homes. Doug Fisher's story is bittersweet. He may never have achieved stardom beyond Larry Simmons, but his contribution to Man About the House was essential. He embodied the kind of character every sitcom needs, the friend who complicates things, who frustrates the protagonists, yet who leaves the audience smiling. Watching him today is to rediscover the humor he brought to the series, a reminder that supporting roles, when played with energy and sincerity, can be just as memorable as the leads. Roy Kinnear, the beloved character actor whose life ended in a tragic accident. Roy Kinnear was born in 1934 in Wigan, Lancashire, and from early on he seemed destined to become one of Britain's most recognizable character actors. With his round face, expressive eyes, and instinct for comic timing, he was never the leading man, but he was always the one audiences remembered. In Man About the House, he appeared as Jerry, a supporting character whose presence injected a dose of familiar humor into the show. Kinnear had a way of stealing scenes effortlessly, with a glance or a muttered aside that turned ordinary dialogue into something unforgettable. His career, however, extended far beyond this sitcom. Kinnear was well known internationally for his role as Mr. Salt, the indulgent father of Veruca Salt, in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, 1971. He became a frequent collaborator of director Richard Lester, appearing in films such as The Three Musketeers, 1973, and its sequels, where his bumbling but lovable portrayals endeared him to audiences worldwide. He was the kind of actor who never needed the spotlight to shine. His performances in supporting roles elevated every production he joined. Off-screen, Kinnear was admired for his kindness and generosity. He was a devoted family man, and his legacy continued through his son, Rory Kinnear, who would go on to become a celebrated actor in his own right. Roy's warmth, professionalism, and ability to blend humor with humanity made him one of the most respected performers of his generation. But his life ended in heartbreak. In 1988, while filming The Return of the Musketeers in Spain, Kinnear was thrown from a horse during a riding scene and sustained severe injuries. He later died in hospital, aged just 54. The suddenness of his death shocked the entertainment world and cast a long shadow over British comedy. It felt cruelly unfair that an actor so full of life, humor, and talent should be taken in such a tragic accident. Roy Kinnear's story is one of a man who may never have been a star in the traditional sense, but who carved out a legacy as one of the finest supporting actors Britain ever produced. His presence in Man About the House and countless other productions is a reminder of how indispensable character actors are, and how their loss leaves a hole that can never truly be filled. Norman Eshley, the charming gentleman whose career was shadowed by fate. Norman Eshley was born in 1945 in Stourbridge, Worcestershire, and trained at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, where his natural charm and poise made him a standout. By the time he joined Man About the House, he was in his late 20s, stepping into the role of Norman Tripp, later known as Ian Cross, who eventually became Chrissy's husband. His character brought a turning point to the sitcom storyline, shifting it from light-hearted flat-sharing escapades toward themes of romance and commitment. Eshley's tall frame, polished delivery, and easy smile made him instantly appealing to audiences, who saw in him the perfect blend of sophistication and warmth. His career blossomed in the 1970s and 1980s, with roles in dramas such as The Professionals and Inspector Morse, alongside a prominent presence in comedies like George and Mildred, where he reprised his connection to the sitcom universe. For a time, it looked as though he might achieve lasting stardom, his versatility allowing him to cross seamlessly between genres. He had all the qualities of a leading man: good looks, talent, and the ability to adapt. Yet his life was abruptly altered in 1990 when he suffered a serious car accident that left him with lasting injuries. Though he recovered enough to work occasionally, his career never regained its earlier momentum. The accident not only limited his opportunities but also cast a shadow over what might have been an even greater legacy. Still, fans never forgot him. His role as Chrissy's suitor in Man About the House and as a neighbor in George and Mildred ensured his place in the memories of sitcom lovers. Norman Eshley passed away in August 2025 at the age of 80. His death was mourned by fans and colleagues who remembered both his talent and his resilience. To many, he represented the charm and polish of a certain golden era of British television, a man whose career might have soared even higher had fate not intervened. Watching him today in Man About the House is to see not just a performer but a glimpse of what British sitcoms could achieve when they combined humor with heart. Daphne Oxenford, the gentle mother figure who became a voice of a generation. Daphne Oxenford was born in 1911 in Barnet, Hertfordshire, and long before she appeared on Man About the House, she had already become a household name in Britain. In the sitcom, she played Chrissy's mother, a role that, while brief, carried the comforting authority of an older generation watching over the free-spirited lives of the young flatmates. Her presence reminded audiences of the generational divide at the heart of the show, parents puzzled by the rapidly changing morals of the 1970s, yet still offering warmth and stability. Oxenford's legacy, however, reached far beyond this sitcom. For decades she was the reassuring voice of Listen with Mother, the BBC radio program that soothed generations of children. Her gentle introduction, "Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin," became one of the most cherished lines in British broadcasting history. She also left her mark on Coronation Street, where she played Esther Hayes, and appeared in countless dramas and comedies across television and stage. Her career was a testament to quiet consistency, proving that one did not need scandal or stardom to become beloved by millions. In her private life, Daphne was known for the same kindness she projected on screen and radio. Colleagues described her as gracious and dependable, the kind of performer who elevated every production simply by being part of it. Unlike many of her contemporaries, she lived free from tabloid controversy, choosing instead to focus on her craft and her family. Daphne Oxenford passed away in 2012 at the remarkable age of 93. Her death marked the end of an era, but her voice and her presence live on in the memories of all who grew up with her. In Man About the House, she may have played a supporting role, but her appearance carried a resonance that fans still remember. She embodied the bridge between the traditional values of the past and the liberating spirit of the 70s, a reminder that even in a sitcom built on cheeky humor, there was always a place for warmth and grace. Leslie Sands, the stern father whose authority gave the sitcom its weight. Leslie Sands was born in 1921 in Bradford, Yorkshire, and built his career as one of Britain's most dependable character actors. In Man About the House, he appeared as Mr. Plummer, Chrissy's father, a role that brought the stern voice of an older generation into the mix of youthful freedom and cheeky comedy. Whenever he appeared on screen, he embodied the authority and skepticism of parents who struggled to understand a world that was rapidly changing in the 1970s. His presence added depth and realism to the sitcom, reminding audiences that behind every joke about flat sharing, there was still the looming judgment of tradition. Before this sitcom, Sands was already a respected actor with a career that stretched across stage, film, and television. He was a familiar face to viewers of Z-Cars, the groundbreaking police drama of the 1960s, where he played Detective Inspector Stone, a role that showcased his ability to command the screen with quiet authority. Beyond acting, Sands also proved himself as a writer, penning plays that reflected his sharp observations of human behavior and often tackling themes of morality and justice. His work demonstrated not only his versatility but also his deep commitment to storytelling in all its forms. Colleagues described Sands as serious and dedicated, a man who approached his craft with integrity. Unlike many actors of his era, he rarely courted publicity or headlines, preferring to let his work speak for itself. His reputation as a craftsman meant that he was trusted to bring weight and credibility to whatever role he took on, whether it was a stern detective, a weary father, or a figure of authority in a light-hearted comedy. Leslie Sands passed away in 2001 at the age of 80. His death was quietly marked, but among those who remembered him, he was celebrated as one of the reliable pillars of British television. Watching him today in Man About the House, audiences can still feel the balance he brought, the seriousness that made the comedy sharper, the authority that made the rebellion of the younger characters funnier. Sands's legacy is not just in the roles he played but in the way he represented the voice of a generation caught between old traditions and new freedoms. When Man About the House first appeared, it was light-hearted and daring, a sitcom that captured the changing spirit of the 1970s. But looking back now, its legacy is marked not only by laughter but by the lives of the actors who made it timeless. 7 of those familiar faces, once so vibrant on screen, are no longer with us, and their stories tell of both triumph and tragedy. Yootha Joyce, whose razor wit as Mildred Roper became legend, was taken far too soon in 1980, leaving audiences stunned at the loss of comedy's brightest star. Brian Murphy, her on-screen husband George, lived into his 90s, but his passing in 2025 felt like the final farewell to an era. Doug Fisher brought cheeky humor as Larry, yet his career never soared beyond that role, and he left us quietly in 2000. Roy Kinnear, beloved for his warmth and comic brilliance, died suddenly in a riding accident in 1988, a tragedy that cut short a remarkable career. Norman Eshley charmed as Chrissy's suitor, but a cruel accident derailed his path, and his death in 2025 reminded us of unfulfilled promise. Daphne Oxenford, the voice of Listen with Mother and the gentle matriarch on screen, passed in 2012 after a long, rich life. And Leslie Sands, the stern father who gave the sitcom its grounding authority, left us in 2001, remembered as one of British television's reliable pillars. Their stories form a mosaic of what it means to live in the public eye. Some shone brightly and left us suddenly, others endured into old age but carried the burden of being forever tied to one role. All of them contributed something essential to Man About the House: humor, warmth, authority, and humanity. Together, they gave life to a sitcom that was more than just entertainment. It was a reflection of a society in transition, a mirror of laughter edged with the reality of change. Rewatching the series today is bittersweet. The jokes remain sharp, the chemistry timeless, yet behind every line lingers the knowledge of the lives that ended. They are gone, but not forgotten. Their performances keep them alive, flickering across screens and into memory, reminding us that comedy is powerful not only because it makes us laugh, but because it captures people we can never truly lose. If you found their stories moving, subscribe to our channel for more untold legacies from cinema and television's past. These actors gave us laughter. It is our turn to keep their memory alive.